Welcome back to Fundamentals of Accountancy, Business and Management. In this video, we're going to be discussing the accounting equation. Content standard. The learners demonstrate an understanding of the accounting equation. Performance standard. The learner shall be able to solve problems by applying the accounting equation. Learning competencies. The learner shall be able to illustrate the accounting equation, perform operations involving simple cases with the use of accounting equation. By the end of this video, you're expected to understand the elements of the accounting equation and use the accounting equation to solve problems. Now let's have an overview of the accounting equation. These are the things that you will learn in detail in this video. The accounting equation is assets is equal to liabilities plus equity. For every transaction, the accounting equation should always be balanced. Now, assets, which is the first word that you can see in the accounting equation, let's define this one. Assets are resources owned by the business. It could be cash, furniture, equipment, and things similar to them. We're going to have a more detailed discussion of assets in the next video. Next would be liabilities. Liabilities are obligations by the business. Could be accounts payable, notes payable, and similar other things. It will also be discussed in detail in the next video. And the last one is equity. It is the residual interest of the owner of the business. So residual interest. Equity would include the capital that was invested by the owner or the owners, and also the income. It will be increased by the income that the business earns. And the detailed discussion of equity will be in the next video. Now, there are 4 elements that affect this equity. It would be investment, withdrawal, revenue, and expenses. We'll be discussing these things as we move on with the transactions that we're going to look into. Now, let's start with the presentation of the accounting equation. So you have here assets is equal to liabilities plus owner's equity. Just like what I said earlier, these both sides of the equation should always be balanced. If there's an increase on the left side on the assets, there should also be an equivalent increase in either the liabilities or owner's equity or both. If there is a decrease in asset, then there should also be an equivalent decrease on the other side. It's either a decrease in liability or an equal decrease in owner's equity, or it could be the total decrease in asset would be equivalent to the combined decrease in liabilities and owner's equity. Now let's move on to determining profit through operation. There is accrual basis of accounting, and there is also cash basis of accounting. In the accrual basis of accounting, accrual basis recognizes revenue when earned and recognizes expenses when incurred. That means that, say for example, it is a service business and you already rendered your service, but your customer hasn't paid yet. That will already be recognized as a revenue because you have already earned the revenue by giving that service. Now, it recognizes expenses when incurred. That means that once you have received, say for example, the telephone bill worth 1,000, even if you don't pay for that on that same day you receive the bill, that should be recorded as an expense. Whether you pay it or not, it should be recorded as an expense when incurred. On the contrary, cash basis of accounting, just like what the word suggests, cash basis. So you recognize revenue when you receive the cash, and you recognize expense when you give out the cash to pay for the expense. So let's take a look at some transactions. You have the first one, received cash for revenue earned. July 21st, a customer hired the services of Reyes. Cash of 15,000 was received from the customer. In this case, we received cash for 15,000. And this cash was payment for the service that Reyes gave. So we have this service revenue, or revenue, it's income, service revenue for 15,000. So our asset is 15,000, and then the other side of the equation is also 15,000. We paid cash for expenses incurred. Cash was paid for the following: gas and oil, 500 pesos, and car repairs, 1,000 pesos. For the gas and oil, we paid 500, and then for car repairs, we paid 1,000. So if cash was paid, the total of cash paid was 1,500. So we have a decrease in cash. So we enclose it in parentheses. And then there is also an equivalent decrease on the owner's equity account. Why is it a decrease? Because gas and oil and car repairs are expenses, and expenses decrease the owner's equity. So we have gas and oil for 500, repair expenses for 1,000. They are inside the parentheses again because they will be deducted from the owner's equity. Expenses are deductions to the owner's equity account. Next one, revenue rendered on account. That means that if it is a service business, you already rendered service, but the customer hasn't paid yet. So it's revenue rendered on account. July 24th, another customer hired the services of Reyes and promised to pay 16,000 pesos on July 31st. So in here, we rendered services. And in the accrual basis, you recognize revenue once it is earned. So when Reyes gave the service, revenue was earned. So it is recorded as service revenue for 16,000. And there's an equivalent asset account that is accounts receivable. What is accounts receivable? This is the account that we use for customers' payables. We already gave the service to them, but they haven't paid us yet. So we record it as accounts receivable. Okay, so the amount of accounts receivable is 16 because that customer promised to pay 16,000, which is the amount of service that Reyes gave. So 16,000 on our left side and then 16,000 on the other side of the equation. Paid for expenses incurred. In this case, we paid 500 pesos for telephone bill. If you paid, that means our cash decreased. So we have a 500 deduction in cash. Again, we put the value in parentheses. When we put it in a parentheses, that means we are going to deduct it from a certain value. So in this case, there's a decrease of 500 pesos because we paid. And we paid for the telephone bill. So we have a telephone expense of 500 pesos. Why is it in parentheses? Because an expense, again, is a deduction from the owner's equity account. Revenue earned with the down payment, balance on account. That means if it is a service business, you already gave your service, let's say, and the customer paid, but it was not enough or it was not equivalent to the service that you gave. So there's still receivable. Another customer, July 27th, another customer hired the services of Reyes. A bill was issued to them for 20,000 pesos, 50% of which was collected. So 50% of which was collected, 50% of 20,000 is 10,000. That means the business received 10,000 cash. So cash of 10,000. And then 50% was collected. That means 50% is still receivable. So that means we have accounts receivable amounting to 10,000. So 10,000 down payment and then 10,000 receivable. Receivable is equivalent to 20,000, which is the amount of the bill. And on the other side, that cash and receivable is actually for the service that was rendered. So we have service revenue. We have to recognize service revenue earned at 20,000. So our assets is increased by 20,000, and then the owner's equity also increased by 20,000. Another transaction. Customer's account collected in cash. July 30. The customer on July 24th paid 50% of his account in cash. This time, you have to go back to July 24th So let's see. There. Another customer hired the services of Reyes and promised to pay 16,000 on July 31st. So there was service rendered, but no cash was received, and that's why we had accounts receivable for 16,000. And then on the transaction, on July 30th transaction, the customer paid 50%. If you remember, it was 16,000, and then 50% was collected. So that's 8,000. That means that the company or the business received cash for 8,000. Again, 8,000 because the total accounts receivable was 16,000, and then the customer paid 50%. So 50% of 16,000 is 8,000. And then there's a decrease in the accounts receivable. The accounts receivable on July 16th, on July 24th was 16,000. But the customer pays half of it. So that means our accounts receivable will decrease by half as well, which is equivalent to 8,000. Next, paid cash for expenses incurred. Paid 10,000 pesos for rental of office space and salaries of 9,000. So in this case, if we pay, that means our cash decreases. So how much is the decrease? 10,000 and 9,000. That is a total decrease of 19,000. And on the other side, we paid 10,000 for rental, so that's rent expense. And then we paid 9,000 for salaries, that's salaries expense. So these are in parentheses again because expenses are deduction from the owner's equity account. So we have a decrease in asset for 19,000. And on the other side, we also have a decrease in owner's equity for 19,000. It's balanced. And those transactions show and prove that the accounting equation should always be balanced, whatever the transaction is. Again, the accounting equation, it's assets is equal to liabilities plus owner's equity. And the things that you have to remember, for every transaction, the accounting equation should always be balanced. Assets are resources owned by the business. Liabilities are obligations by the business. Equity is the residual interest of the owner of the business. And there are 4 elements that affect equity. Investment, when the owner invests in the business, there's an increase in equity. Withdrawal, when the owner withdraws something from the business, then it decreases the equity. Revenue, the revenue increases the equity, and expenses decreases the equity. Thanks for watching.